Hello, I'm Yannick. We are here in Stellenbosch in South Africa, and today we're talking about the suspension. I show you Nino's suspension setup, and afterwards also I teach you some basics how to do it yourself. Why does Nino chooses a dual suspension bike is that he has more control on the trail, he recover better, and also he can choose more technical descents. Nino prefers a pretty smooth suspension setup. We have as maximum tokens air volume spacers in the fork as possible, so we can lower the pressure a little bit. We have still the small bumps absorbing very well, and also the big jumps, and especially when he's doing his tricks in the air. The rebound is more on the faster side, and the compression is fully open. Also the bike is pretty leveled, so the fork and the shock works pretty much equal. That gives quite a good control on the bike. Nino's pressure in his fork, we start with 78 psi, and from the shock we're starting with 135 psi. We adjust the air pressure and the volume spacers, especially for rocky and roots courses. We have a little bit more pressure in it, and for the smoother tracks we run a little bit less. I quite often do a service on the suspension. It's between 10 and 15 hours, and then I open the fork, the shock, clean out everything, just to have the best setup for the races. Sag is the amount of travel used when the bike settles with the rider on board. Remember to set your sag with all your riding kit. Helmet, shoes, backpack. These can weigh a fair amount and therefore alter the pressure needed for a perfect setup. Too much sag and you will sit too low in the travel. Too little sag and you will not get as much grip. You are setting the airspring, which is weight sensitive, and very important when the rider can weigh 5 to 6 times the weight of his bike. Take care to dismount the bike without bouncing or shifting your weight forwards or backwards. The distance between the O-ring and the dust seal is the amount of sag. Measure the gap. 20 mm with a 100 mm fork is 20% sag. If it's a longer fork for light trail use, 25% can work well. In the rear, it's often recommended between 25% and 30% sag. The more aggressive the rider, the more tokens or spacers added will ramp up the end of the stroke, avoiding bottoming out. The other benefit of tuning the air volume for every token added is that you can run 5 to 10 psi less pressure, which will increase the small bump sensitivity, making for a smoother, grippier ride. This is the force needed to move the suspension through its travel, which is controlled by the flow of oil through holes inside your damper. This can be adjusted to firm up or look out your forks and rear shock. On our Scott Sparks we have a system that gives full control by the push of the handlebar mounted twin lock lever. In its fully open position, it gives the rider full travel. One click into traction control increases the compression for the front, reducing the air volume, increasing the firmness, but also lifting the sag point, making climbing technical trails so much more efficient. This is the speed at which the suspension returns back at you after compression. I personally love the RockShox symbol, a tortoise for a slower and a jackalope for a faster. If your fork is set too fast, it can feel like you're riding on a springboard or a pogo stick. Now you will need to test it. Ride on a flat road, compress the suspension and notice how fast the front and rear return back to sag point. If anything, the front could be slightly faster than the rear. It is important to know your pump. Every pump is slightly different. Take your shock pump with you on your first few rides so that you can make any necessary adjustments until you are happy. Keep your forks and rear shocks clean and lubed. Take a silicone lube or a specific suspension product. Apply to a paper towel, then wipe onto the seals. Push the suspension through its travel several times and then wipe clean any excess. This will keep your suspension in a healthy state. Always consider a full service of the internals of your suspension after 80 to 150 hours or yearly.